Imagine escaping your worst nightmare, driving home under a beautiful morning sun, only to look in your rearview mirror and realize your face is no longer your own. What if the door you used to escape was actually the throat of the monster swallowing you whole? This is the terrifying reality of three friends who broke the golden rule of the estate: never stay past midnight. Watch closely, because in this house, even the sunlight is a trap. Welcome to the Evening Chronicles. Pull up a chair, dim your lights, and make sure your doors are locked. Tonight, we uncover a terrifying truth that was never meant to leave the dark. If you love stories that haunt you long after the video ends, you're in the right place. If your heart is racing as fast as Kiao's right now, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Join our circle here at the Evening Chronicles and never miss a nightmare. Let's find out if anyone makes it alive.
Every town has that one place. The house parents warn their children about, and the place teenagers avoid after dark. For generations, the locals in this quiet district whispered a single golden rule about the massive, rotting wooden mansion at the edge of the woods: never stay past midnight. But Kai, So, and Aung didn't believe in old superstitions. To them, it was just a joke, a midnight dare to boost their new social media channel. Armed with flashlights and a camera, they stood at the rusty iron gates just as a heavy storm began to brew. They thought it would be an easy thrill, a quick vlog, a night on a dusty floor, and bragging rights for life. But the moment their boots crossed the threshold and the gates swung shut behind them, the air turned ice cold. The house didn't just feel empty, it felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for them. Inside, the mansion was a graveyard of old memories. The oppressive smell of mold, damp wood, and old copper filled their lungs. So and Aung laughed off the heavy silence, setting up their sleeping bags right in the center of the grand living room. Dust motes floated lazily in the beams of their flashlights, casting long, dancing shadows across peeling wallpaper and ancient, stained family portraits where the faces had been intentionally scratched out. But Kai, however, couldn't shake a growing sense of dread. It felt like dozens of eyes were staring at them from the darkness above. Then, at exactly 11:45 p.m., all the laughter died. A heavy rhythmic thud echoed from the floorboards directly above their heads, followed by a sound that made their blood run cold, the distinct, muffled weeping of a child. Aung's smile completely vanished, his face turning pale in the artificial light as he whispered, "Did you guys hear that?" Instead of running, curiosity and the desire for good footage took over, a fatal mistake. Armed with their flashlights, they followed a trail of wet, foul-smelling, muddy footprints leading away from their camp. The tracks led them down a narrow hallway to a hidden basement door that stood wide open, breathing out a foul, sickening stench. The basement was a labyrinth of shadows. As they descended the narrow stone staircase, the walls grew slick, covered in a strange, glistening dark mold that seemed to pulse slowly under the flashlight beams. Kai stepped on something soft and wet, realizing the floor itself felt less like stone and more like living tissue. They were no longer just exploring an abandoned house. They were walking straight into the underbelly of a living creature. In the deepest, darkest corner of the cellar, the flashlight beam caught a horrifying shape. A pale, emaciated child sat huddled against the damp stone wall. As the light hit him, the boy slowly turned his head, and Aung let out a choked scream. Thick, coarse black thread had been brutally sewn through the child's lips, sealing his mouth into a permanent, horrific grimace. The child didn't move, but suddenly a voice, ancient, cracked, and filled with absolute despair, blasted directly into Kai's mind. It was a psychic echo, ringing painfully inside his skull. "Run! It doesn't want you to leave. It's waking up." The moment the warning ended, the basement floor began to violently shift and liquefy beneath their feet.
Chaos erupted instantly. The concrete floor dissolved into a living, black mire of rotting sludge. Pale, decaying hands erupted from the walls and the ground, clawing desperately at the boys and tearing at their clothes. Kiao watched in absolute horror as So and Aung were violently dragged screaming beneath the surface of the black mud, their flashlights sinking into the darkness. Kiao scrambled wildly toward a small crawl space above, his fingers bleeding as he clawed at the breaking wood, but a massive, bloated hand of rotting flesh tore out of the mire, wrapping tightly around his ankle like an iron vice. With one final, desperate cry for help, Kiao was pulled backwards, down into the total, suffocating darkness. Kiao gasped violently for air, his lungs burning as his eyes snapped open. He sat up on the soft plush sofa in the living room. The storm was gone. Beautiful, bright morning sunlight filled the entire house. So and Aung was sitting nearby, completely unharmed, casually scrolling through their phones and laughing. "Hey man, you slept forever," So smiled, picking up his car keys. "Let's head home." Kiao wept with pure relief, convinced that the entire basement ordeal had just been a horrific, vivid nightmare. They walked out of the house, got into their sedan, and started driving down the sunlit road. The cursed mansion receded in the distance. Kiao let out a deep breath, feeling safe at last. But as his eyes drifted to his reflection in the rearview mirror, his blood turned to ice. The reflection staring back at him wasn't his own face. It was the pale, eyeless child from the basement staring back at him with hollow sockets. Paralyzed with fear, Kiao slowly turned his head to look at his friends in the front seats. So was driving, but a deep, thick black stitched line ran entirely around his throat. Aung turned around to look at him, his mouth wide open in a frozen mechanical laugh, but his voice sounded like a corrupted, looping digital audio file. Kiao tried to scream, but his own jaw was locked completely tight. He looked out the car window in horror. The entire city was an illusion. Every pedestrian walking on the sidewalk had smooth, blank flesh where their faces should be. They were all mannequins, watching the car pass. They had never left the house. The illusion shattered with the sound of exploding glass. The sunlit city blocks melted away like hot ink running down a canvas, and the world reconstructed itself instantly. Kiao found himself right back where he started, strapped flat to an old rusted bed frame in the dark, rotting master bedroom of the mansion. An elongated, shadowy silhouette stood over him, holding a cold metallic needle. A slow, heavy ticking of an ancient grandfather clock echoed through the room as an icy whisper vibrated through the walls. "If you sleep here, you belong to us forever." As the needle pierced his skin, stitching his lips together with thick black thread, Kiao's fading eyes drifted to a dust-covered family portrait on the wall. There, trapped in faded ink from a century ago, smiled Kiao, So, and Aung, dressed in antique clothing. Their souls had already been fully digested.
But the house wasn't done playing with its prey. In a sudden, blinding flash of light and a violent rewind sound, Cure opened his eyes. He was standing outside the rusty iron gates again. The night storm was howling, the crickets were chirping, and So and Aung was standing right beside him, completely fine, holding their flashlights. "Hey, Huck, what are you staring at?" Aung laughed, clapping him on the shoulder. "Let's go inside." It was an endless, torturous loop. Cure tried to scream, tried to turn his body and run away into the dark forest, but his limbs completely refused to obey his mind. His legs moved entirely on their own, walking his body right back through the front door of the mansion, against his will. They were doomed to die, reset, and die again, their terror serving as the fuel that kept the mansion alive. The next morning, the sun rose over a quiet, ordinary neighborhood. The nightmarish illusion inside remained hidden from the world, but the physical world left behind its grim, cold reality. On the wooden front steps of the rotting house, local authorities discovered 3 cold, lifeless bodies lying perfectly still across the porch, their faces frozen in expressions of absolute terror. Outside the gates, the neighborhood residents still warned travelers and teenagers never to step inside past midnight. The house sits in total silence in the daylight, completely reset, hiding its new ghosts and patiently waiting for the next group of skeptics who think the legend is just a story. The house is always waiting for its next guests. Will it be you? Thank you for spending your night with us at the Evening Chronicles. Share this story with someone you want to keep awake tonight. Sleep well if you can, and we will see you in the next Chronicle.